Natalia, thank you very much, and thanks to the Media Center for the great work that you do. I'm completing today a two-day visit to Ukraine, and my role as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee is to get a greater understanding of the situation that faces Ukraine, Europe, and the world. I've met with senior Ukrainian political and military leaders, including the Prime Minister and the President and the Defense Minister and a number of other people. I visited the Maidan, where the Ukrainian people, as you all know, put their lives on the line for a unified and a democratic Ukraine. They're going to need to carry on in that same spirit to pull off a fair and a free election, as they all want to do, in the face of unrelenting pressure and threats from Russian armed forces and the people that Russia has brought in to support their goals here in Ukraine. America's support for the Ukrainian people must also be resolute, and there's a number of steps that I believe that we should take and can take to support the Ukrainian people in their struggle for a Ukraine that is free and whole. First, these are the additional things that I believe we should do. First, we should expedite the aid that we've already promised to make sure that it arrives promptly, things like radios and helmets. But there is a need for that delivery to be quick. Second, we should provide additional support, including body armor and fuel that the Ukrainians need to protect themselves. Third, we should make more robust use of the powers that are already established in executive order, which authorizes sanctions against the Russian financial, energy, metals, mining, engineering, and defense sectors, and to use these more robust sanctions to ensure that Mr. Putin pays a price for the illegal actions of Russia against Ukraine and Russia's efforts to undermine democratic processes in Ukraine. Finally, we should use this authority to sanction Russian banks in addition to the one bank that has already been sanctioned, and we should use this existing authority to take on Russia's manipulation of energy prices and supplies, which it uses to coerce not only Ukraine, but also many of its neighbors. We must end Russian energy extortion. And of all the things that we can do, I believe that this would be the most important thing that we can do, is to end the extortion that Russia uses against the countries of Europe to gain its ends and to try to deter Europe, the United States, and Ukraine, of course, from stopping Russia from the kind of behavior that they're engaged in. They use energy as a weapon, and we must neutralize Russia's ability to use that energy weapon. Hopefully by agreement on a common pricing so that one country cannot be picked off by Russia and used against other countries. We need to have a much greater effort on conservation and diversification. There will be a price that will be paid in this effort. We in America may be paying higher prices as a result of acting against the use of energy by Russia to gain its ends. But all of us must decide, would we rather pay a higher price for energy, whether it comes through diversification, conservation, alternative energy? Would we rather pay that price or see a war take a much higher price? And I think that if Mr. Putin understands that we are going to act, hopefully in a united way, to end Russian energy extortion, hopefully he will then understand that this price is too high for him to continue the actions which he is engaged in. Earlier this week, I visited Afghanistan, where the Afghan people stood up to the threats and the violence of the Taliban to vote in record numbers for a peaceful transfer of power in Afghanistan. I am confident that the people of Ukraine, buoyed by the spirit of the Maidan, will show similar resolve in their struggle for a united democratic country. And I'd be happy to try to answer a few questions.
Just a second.
Senator Levin, Isaac Webb from the Kiev Post here. So earlier this week, John McCain said that the U.S. should start providing lethal aid to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. And yesterday, speaking of the Carnegie Endowment in Washington, Lubkivsky, the Deputy Defense Minister here, kind of echoed that sentiment. Are there any plans in the works, kind of beyond providing meals, beyond providing body armor and fuel? Will lethal aid be provided?
The label lethal and non-lethal can be used for various purposes. I believe that we should provide stronger assistance, both militarily, to Ukraine. The most important thing, however, that we can do in addition to the stronger military support, and I've given some examples, by the way, which has not yet been provided, including body armor and fuel. Fuel is very much needed. I don't know if you call that lethal or non-lethal, but it's essential. And I'm not going to apply labels because the important thing is that there be additional military equipment and support. Obviously, so far, what we've provided can be increased in terms of lethality. It can be increased. Ammunition, certain types of weapons are appropriate as far as I'm concerned. Those, I guess, would be called lethal. In any event, they're more effective. And I would support additional weapons, but we're told, for instance, in the area of pistols and rifles, that there's no shortage of those already here in Ukraine. They're lethal, and if they need them, we ought to provide them. But I think that the area of sanctions is the one thing that can make a difference in terms of Putin's decision-making, that if he really believes that the banks that he and his oligarchs use are going to be frozen, and those accounts, that it can get his attention in ways that providing rifles or ammunition will not get his attention. So I want to focus on the items that I've mentioned, more effective military capability, fuel, body armor, the additional, if they need additional rifles and pistols, fine, and ammunition, fine. If that falls again in the label of lethality, then I would provide that type of additional support. But sanctions can be effective. They're under consideration right now. When I say sanctions, I mean additional sanctions. So far, it's only one bank. There are dozens of banks in Russia. There are billions of Russian assets and dollars in U.S. banks, and we ought to go after that under existing authority, because that, I think, will catch Mr. Putin's attention.
One more from Globe and Mail here.
Senator Levin, I'm wondering, according to Title 22 of the U.S. Code, it provides for the recognition of state sponsors of terrorism. And the last couple of weeks, Russia clearly fits that bill. Is there the political will within the Senate to direct the State Department to include Russia on the list of state sponsors of terrorism that might enable a legal process to provide enhanced sanctions, particularly including, well, clearly Cuba, Iran, Sudan, and Syria are on that list right now. But I'm interested whether or not there is the political will in the Senate to see something like that happen.
There is the political will in the Senate to urge the President to use the authority which exists without even getting into the question of that particular statute. There is an executive order authorized by law which authorizes the Treasury right now to use sanctions against against Russian assets and Russian accounts, including correspondent accounts in the United States. There are billions of dollars of Russian accounts in the United States. They can be frozen now under existing executive order, which is authorized by existing law without getting into that particular issue. So the existing authority is sufficient to take very strong sanctioning action against Russian banks that have correspondent accounts in the United States. The authority exists. It should be used, and that includes Gazprom. Yes.
Якщо можна, від українських медіа, чи є запитання? Якщо немає, тоді я передам. Є запитання, перепрошую. Дякую. Thanks.
Агентство «Укрінформ», Василь Короткий.
I will translate, no worry.
Скажіть, будь ласка, зараз Росія погрожує можливим вторгненням для захисту росіян у зв'язку з антитерористичною операцією. Наскільки можливим це оцінюють Сполучені Штати, такий варіант? І яка, власне, буде реакція в цьому плані?
So currently Russia threatens to invade Ukraine in order to protect Russian-speaking population. What do you think is the possibility for that really, and what would be the reaction from the United States, from Ukrainian Information Agency?
It's very hard to know what to assess the odds are. I've asked that same question of everybody that we've met with. What do you think the likelihood is? And the answers vary from very likely to no, he's not going to make that mistake because he will find huge resistance, even in areas in the east that he might think there wouldn't be resistance. There will be huge resistance should the Russian army move across that border. So I'm not in a position really to give you any kind of a definitive prediction as to the likelihood. Has he made the decision to do it? I think that, I won't say a consensus, but I would think most of the people that we've talked to, and we can give you a longer list of people we've talked to in addition to the President and to the Prime Minister and to the Defense Minister. But I think that probably most people would think that he's not yet finally decided to make that mistake of crossing the border. And I hope that the world response, should he do so, would be an extremely strong response in various ways that I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to speculate on. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've been advised that. Thank you very much for your time, Senator Levin, with us at Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.